All right. My favorite topic, public choice. I enjoy it. It's where I take apart the government. It's like my favorite time in my life. It's like, I feel like Apocalypse Now, where I'm going to drop tons of napalm on the government. And I like the smell of napalm in the morning. All right, so what is the government role? We talk about that. The government, right? So that's a picture of a seven samurai. They're like the idea of a stationary bandit. Right? You have roving bandits and stationary bandits. Roving bandits is bandits that go from village to village and pillage the villages and steal the production of people. Right? So what's happening, people are going to overinvest in their protection to the point that if they overinvest in protecting their property, and the cost of protecting their property is far greater than the net benefits of producing goods, they are just going to produce zero. So the idea of a stationary bandit is the stationary bandit is also a bandit that is going to tax you to provide protection. That's number one rule. But also the government is often modeled as a benevolent, omnipotent social welfare maximizing that provide public goods. Right? Patents subsidize the production of ideas. Right? Provide goods that will be underprovided by the market because the cost will exceed the profits, like national defense, police, road, bridges, etc. Right? But Thomas Hobbes told that the government of a state is a necessary evil. Right? It's here to protect your property rights and enforce the contracts. Right? Now, this is a basic fundamental role of the government. Now, the question is, what does the government actually do as opposed to what the government should do, and why is that? The government does all those things. Protect you against your bad decision. Those 50 gallons of Coke, it goes all down at the movie theater. You cannot fly anymore. Supposedly it's to protect you, but there is little evidence they do protect you because I don't know what the snow globe can do to you, all right? Or your soap, your sunscreen, your lipstick, all these things. The government decides who you can associate with. That's a nice map of banned gay marriages. I don't want to enter in the discussion whether it's moral or not. I'm just saying that there's a thing that says freedom of association, which is in the First Amendment. You should be free to associate with whoever you want. The government is entering the business of marriage. Or is it related to the fundamental rights of the government? I don't know. It tells you we can work with we or not. Where's that? You know what is that nice barrier, nice fence? Mexico fence. Tells you what is money, what is not money. It tells you who can carry weapons, who cannot carry weapons. It tells you how much you should pay people. It tells you post office, Newman. If you have a post office, you control everything. No business can provide first-class mail. It's in the Constitution, actually, as a matter of fact. Right? It tells you, it's not very clear, but there's two doors here. There's a door for black people, a door for white people. You cannot do business with whoever you want. And if you want to do business with a minority, you have to take a different door than if you are white. Right? Freedom of association. It tells you whether you can drive a taxi or not. The government tells you too many things to do which have nothing to do with what economists and political philosophers tend to agree upon. So the question is, how do we reach that point where the government does so many things, and how can we prevent that? Well, that thing is we the people, which is Constitution and Bill of Rights, right? That thing, those people are voters. If you want the pro-government to do bad things, you say, you're fired. I'm not going to vote against somebody else. Voting should be a mechanism to control government doing bad things, correct? By having terms. The Constitution does what? What does the Constitution do? I'm training for my citizenship test, so I'm going to quiz you. What does the Constitution do? It defines what is the government and what the government can and cannot do. What are the rights of the people and what are their duties. Right? So the Constitution limits the role of the government, what it can and cannot do. So you assume that document has some value that will prevent the government to do some of the things it's doing. But so why is it not working? That's where public trust comes from. Guess what? Politicians are human beings. And they are flawed. Like any human beings. When you enter office, whether your name is Barack Obama or Mitt Romney, he doesn't give you a little halo over the head and wings that push on your back and you start flying like a little angel and suddenly you become a devout servant of the public. No, because economists tells you, politicians are like anybody else. They are self-interested, but the incentive and constraint they face are different from the constraint they face if they were in the private sector. When you're a business, what are your constraints? Resource constraints, price, consumer sovereignty, profit and loss. That's what guides your business decisions in general. When you're a politician, what do you try to do? You try to get elected. And how do you get elected?
Lie excessively.
No, how do you get elected? But not by pleasing the constituent, by making promises to the constituents. That's different. You make promises to the constituents and you tell things they want to hear. We will tax those rich, evil people. But you poor people, everything will be free. All right?
Yeah, but to stay in power, there is at least some amount of pleasing of your constituents. There's a small...
I'm not done yet. I'm not done yet. Don't start. Don't start with me. I'm not done yet. You'll get the answer to your question. Don't worry about it. I'll get it. Don't make me jump to slides. Bureaucrats, they are part of a government. CIA, FBI, post office, veterans. They are part of a government. They are members of a government. But they don't have the same incentive as politicians. They don't try to maximize their vote. They try to maximize their budgets. Because the bigger their budget, the bigger their salaries, and the likelihood they are going to stay in place. And what do voters want? They want to receive things from the government at the lowest possible cost. Free, 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 free. But I don't want to pay the bill. Right? Knowledge is power. So why do voters are going to vote for people that they're going to make promises, but most of the time, politicians don't do anything on their promises? I don't want to talk about a certain president that has been elected twice in the last 2 terms, that made tons of promises, that never happened. Never happened. Not I want to make a comment that is like George Bush number 4, but close to. Right? So knowledge is power. I blame the voters most of the time for what's the situation of the government. Voters. Because knowledge is power, but knowledge is costly. It takes time to read the bills. It takes time to read the policy proposal. It takes time to read a president agenda. How long do you think is the president agenda, the presidential candidate agenda? How do you think it is? Big proposal. 350 pages, 500 pages? Who has read the entire program of each candidate? Yeah. And how many of you know the implication of every single policy implications they are trying to, policy proposal they give you? How many of you know the consequences of the American Care Act? How many of you will know exactly the consequences of increasing the wage to $9 an hour? Minimum wage to $9 an hour. Yeah, because you're an econ major. Right? In theory. Because you read econometric studies, because you read studies about it. But the average voter, do you think the average voter has time to go read the econometric studies? No. Why? Exactly. They're too busy working. Right? So people, they know two things. Their individual vote has a low probability to affect the outcome of elections. Correct or not correct? What is the probability that your individual vote will swing the elections to your preferred candidate? Well, you have more luck to play the Powerball, by the way. Right? You have more likely if you want to play a Powerball. So it's almost impossible that your vote as an individual will swing the election outcomes. So what is your incentive to stay informed about the issues? Zero. So what do you vote on?
I like him.
I like him. I'm not American, I'm not a specialist of the US history, but I heard that the first term that Nixon ran and he lost the election during the debate is because he had the 5 o'clock shadow beard. And people thought he was a, slob. Right? The elections, the debate took after 5 o'clock, he had that 5 o'clock shadow beard, he's a dark-haired guy, looked like a slob. People said, I'm not going to vote for that slob. Look at him, he cannot take care of himself. What do people vote on? They vote on big ideas, Democrats, social issues, helping the poor, social equality, conservative, national defense, small government, social conservative. People align themselves to the parties they want to go to, regardless if in effect the people are actually communicating and going to act upon the ideas of their party. Right? So most people, most voters, they vote just based on those big ideas. What are political parties? What are political parties?
Groups of people working together to get certain objectives done.
Yes. I call them big merchandising company, advertising company. They advertise themselves to the voters. They don't detail the things, they simplify everything. Look, we help the poor. Look, we keep out the immigrants. Look, we protect the country, etc., etc. They are big single messages that people don't need a lot of education, a lot of knowledge to understand. Now, is it true that everybody is rationally ignorant? No, because there are people, they know they can gain from political decisions. They know they can gain from politicians. So they have incentive to be informed and to try to influence the political party, the outcome of the elections, of the policy outcomes. Right? If they want, assume you are from Hawaii. Who was my gentleman that got his, here he is. Is a degree in Hawaii. What is Hawaii famous for? Production of sugar. Big sugar industry, right? Cane sugar.
I was going to say surfing and smoking weed.
Those are the people I know.
I assume sugar is famous for their, Hawaii is famous for their production of cane sugar. Do they have an interest in trying to have high tariff on foreign sugars? Yes. You have high tariff on foreign sugars and quotas on foreign sugar, so you maintain the price of domestic sugar higher. What is the political message that those cane sugar producers, or I forgot the name of it, the big lobby has? Do they really say to the politicians and the general public, look, we need to have tariff on sugar so I can afford to drive a Mercedes. I can have a big house, have a high income, despite the fact I'm an inefficient producer of cigar. They're never going to say that. What they're going to say to the people is they're like, I need money to feed my children. And because I need money to feed my children, the average voter say, of course, look at those poor sugar producers. They need money to feed their children. Who cannot leave those evil foreign producers of sugar, impoverish our American producers of sugar, and let those children die? What does the average voter say? It's going to cost me like 1 cent a pound more, or 5 cents a pound more. Who cares? Only 5 cents a pound more, 5 cents a pound more to help the children. And of course, everybody vote for it without thinking about it. Yes. How about minimum wage? Those poor people, they are starving. They need a higher minimum wage. What is it? $3 more an hour? Of course. Yes. Should I keep going? Corn subsidies, pork subsidies, cops in California, firefighter, prison guards. Everybody gets everything. Right? And what is the message? I need to feed my children. It's a simple message, by the way. If you ever want to get money from something, it's all about your children. Remember that. Right? Look, over the years, this is the number of billions of dollars spent in federal lobbying. This is the number of lobbyists. Right? Those lobbyists have been hired by private corporations, businesses to lobby the government to get influence the political process. Where does that money come from? Consumers, yes. And is that money being used for innovation, lower cost of production, develop new products? No. That money is being used to influence political parties, political outcomes, to get what you want. Look, financial industry, insurance, and real estate. What a shocker. In 2011, 2012, we were the biggest donors to political parties. Amazing what? After the bubble bursted, the housing bubble bursted, what everybody was talking about is regulating more those industries. What do those people do? Give a bunch of money to Democrats and Republicans. Here's a secret for you. Barack Obama received more money from the financial industry than did Mitt Romney. Even Mitt Romney company on which he was a big board of directors gave more money to Barack Obama than he gave to them. Health, energy and resource, transportation, all those things. Now, here's a typical example I want to talk, and I love talking about that because it's kind of recent. It's that thing, the automobile bailout. You want an example of crony capitalism? There's no one better than this one. The automobile industry, American automobile industry, which is the too big to fail industry, and we talked about that slightly this morning. Hey, you don't want to buy my car? You want to buy those foreign cars because you think they are better? Guess what? It doesn't matter. Because we are going to see the government, and they are going to bail us out for you not helping us out. And you know what's the funniest part? Is that all those CEOs, so you have to eliminate Ford. It's a bad example. Ford is not there anymore. All those CEOs from Chrysler, GM, and all those banks, do you know how they went to DC, how they got to DC? They took their private jet to fly to DC to beg the government and the Congress to get bailed out. They own private jet, they don't fly commercial couch, economy. No, they have their private jets. Right? Ohio. Who won the state of Ohio during the presidential election? Obama. Those Obama leading blue squares, as where the automobile industry workers are mostly located. Now, here's an interesting fact. You know, Mitt Romney wrote an op-ed saying that we should let the automobile industry go bankrupt. And Barack Obama jumped on the occasion and said, look, He wants to kill the American industry. What people don't realize is that that's not what Mitt Romney said. He said you should go through the bankruptcy process, which means you should realign your assets so you don't make the taxpayers pay for the worker's salary, but as opposed to realign the assets. It was a financial economic decision, which is you should not bail out the workers. What Barack Obama proposed was no different than what Mitt Romney proposed, but Barack Obama wanted to bail out the workers and the unions so they get their salary paid, while Mitt Romney wanted to bail out the shareholders and the investors from their bad decisions. The question is, why did the automobile industry reach that point where they went bankrupt?
Shitty cars.
Yeah, so why did they produce bad cars? You know, people are not buying them. If they were not buying them, they will buy them. They will not be bankrupt. Sorry. Well, they are no longer bankrupt, supposedly now. But why? Because they benefit from those tariffs and protection and quotas, right? And the automobile industry is strongly unionized, and the owners of corporations could not deal with the unions and lower their salaries to make profits. Remember the Twinkies? What did Twinkie company, I forgot the name of the Twinkie company. Hostess. What did Hostess go bankrupt? Like bankrupt to the point there is no more Hostess, right? It's a good thing. It's a positive externality that the bankruptcy of Hostess. No more obesity guys, probably.
Another company bought the Twinkie brand over.
Yeah, they bought the Twinkie brand. But why did Hostess went into liquidation? Yes, because the workers did not refuse to take the deal. And when the investors and the shareholders said, we are going to have to close, they say, try it. And what happened? They closed. Right? Unions have a powerful thing, which is they can take hostage shareholders and business people that want to try to make things work. And in that case, unions have a powerful voting power. I want to talk about another perspective, which is Brian Kaplan's view, which is the myth of a rational voter. Brian Kaplan has another view. I think it's the two sides of the same coin. But Brian Kaplan talks about this idea that, hey, voters are not rationally ignorant. They don't necessarily are rational. They are actually rationally irrational. They vote for policies that are going to make them happy in their belief. Because my happiness is contingent on whether I believe that I'm right or wrong. And being wrong does not make me happy. So I want to support politicians that are going to make policies that confirm my own biases. There is a book called Self-Interest, Beyond Self-Interest, which is a experimental psychology book, where they run a bunch of surveys and experiments, where they show that people don't vote for their own particular benefit, they vote for the benefit of the group they belong to. So they are going to vote for policies that are going to protect correctional officers, or teachers, or miners, or automobile workers. They are not going to vote for policies that are going to bring them benefits to them, but more to their own social group. But ultimately, this is one thing. The definition of a state by Bastiat is the greatest definition ever. The state is the great fiction through which everybody endeavors to live at the expense of everybody else. We try to influence the political process to get benefits at the expense of everybody else. Whether you are a single individual or a business. Whether you are those financial banks those automakers, those sugar producers, those teachers' unions. Everybody, when the government can change the rules of the game, what is your incentive? Is to try to influence the change of the rules of the game. And you want the guy that makes the rules of the game to make it on your side. So you are going to spend resources to get the rule maker to make rules that are going to benefit you at the expense of other people. That's as simple as that. And that's because you can. Because the government is not an objective, neutral player in the game. And it cannot be an objective, neutral player of the game because the players of the game determine whether the government is going to stay in place or not. Or who are the people in the government who are going to stay in power. The median voter model. Do you know about that? Have you heard about that? Who has never heard about that? All right. So median voter model is like, for example, you have two candidates, right? You have Mitt and Barack. Right? And they are going for the elections. You, in the majority rule, you win the election if you get 50% of the vote plus one. Right? So Mitt Romney is here, and Barack Obama is here. Who is more likely in that situation to get more votes? Obama is getting Ines, Peter, and Alex, while Sophia is going to get, Mitt is going to get only Max and Sophia. What's going to happen, therefore? Mitt Romney is going to try to capture the median voter. And to capture the median voter, you're going to do what? Switch your position slightly toward the median voter so you can capture that vote. Look, I'm not a specialist of American elections, but you have primaries, and after you have the presidential elections. Do you notice that each candidate during the primaries have far more extreme views than one they have during the presidential election? Why? Because during the primaries, you're trying to capture the median voter of your own party, which is far more extreme than the median voter of the entire spectrum. So politicians, they switch their views as they run toward the final round. And they try to get closer to the median voter. What was debate for? To convince the undecided voters, the people who are on the fence. And who are the undecided voters? The median voters. And what you're going to do? Collect those votes. And at the end, you end up with that guy. C'est blanc, bonnet, and bonnet blanc. Two faces of the same coin. Two-faced guy. This is what happened. Literally. Now, to the answer of my young former student, yes, voter can change their mind and they're going to punish you if you don't do what they say. If only they had some memories. If only they had memories of what's happened in the past. But the study shows that's not true. They show that voters have short-term memory. And the only thing that matters to them is those three things. Growth in personal disposable income, inflation rate, and the duration of a party incumbency. Those are the three factors that voters care about when they go to the booth. Right? The incumbent party generally wins election when personal disposable income is growing. That's when you have cut in taxes, more stimulus spending and all these things. Inflation is low, and when the incumbent party has not been in power too long. Look, there's a prediction model, and this is the actual vote share. If you look at those elections, the predictions when those characteristics take place are almost mimicking each other. Right? So every time the party has not been too long, the personal disposable income is high, inflation rate is low, you can be sure the incumbent party is going to be reelected. right? Voters are myopic, and they don't go very far away. They look at the recent data. They don't look at the 4 last years. They look at the last year, the election year when they look at those data. All right? This is an idea. Growth in personal disposable income peaks in election year. Year 1, your personal disposable income goes up, right? Because the government, the person that ran for the term did everything he could to boost your personal disposable income. It goes up. Year 2 and 3 goes down, and on election year, what happened to your personal disposable income? It goes up again. And systematically, you see that through the election process. And those are data for the last, since 1947. Systematically, you are going to see that trend in personal disposable income. Because what you want is to be re-elected or elected. I'm going to finish quickly with that. It's that Gordon Tullock and James Buchanan won the Nobel Prize. Well, excuse me. James Buchanan won the Nobel Prize. Gordon Tullock didn't get it, even though they co-authored most of their work together. And he wrote a famous book they wrote a book called The Calculus of Consent. How do we prevent the government abuses? How do we try to control those issues I'm talking about? Buchanan was highly influenced by Knud Wicksell, who was a Swedish economist, political economist. So Knud Wicksell was very extreme. He said, to pass anything, you should have unanimous consent. Is that possible? Not in large population. It's possible in small cantons in Switzerland. Right? You have unanimous voting in Switzerland, but in small cantons, because you don't have much people. But think of a population of California, or Texas, or even Colorado. It's almost impossible to have unanimous consent. So you will never be able to pass anything. So what's the alternative? It's to have what we call supermajority. 2/3 of the votes or 3/4 of approvals to change things when it comes to constitutional rules. For everyday politics, simple majority is enough. That's their proposal. Now, there's something sometimes, there's supermajority rule in the Congress, for example, to change taxes. For example, to pass your stimulus checks, or those tax cuts, what we call the Bush tax cuts, you needed to have supermajority, 2/3 of the votes. Was that possible? No. But in the Congress, you have the special rules, which is called what? Reconciliation. Which means you can get for 10 years a change of the constitutional rules, tax, for example, if you have 50% of the vote plus 1. So it's not a permanent change, but it's a change for 10 years. It's called reconciliation. That's why the Congress has been able to pass the Bush tax cuts, which, by the way, were extended by Barack Obama a couple of times. Despite the fact that once he was elected, before he was elected, he said, as soon as the tax Bush rules will be expiring, what am I going to do? Not renew them because I don't want to cut taxes for rich people. What did he do? He passed an agreement with Republicans to extend the tax Bush tax cuts. Right? Is there any hope? Well, yes, there is hope. Right? The hope is that, well, we have events like that to get people more informed about the world of politics, how it works. Right? You have to reduce the cost of being informed. You heard about those podcasts, blog, short videos, Learn Liberty, speech, things that are easy to access quickly and get quick information. You also want to reduce the benefits of being biased. If you prefer, increase the cost of being biased. And to reduce the benefit of being biased, you have to educate people about the cost of being biased. If people knew, for example, that increased minimum wage actually hurt the poor as opposed to help them, they will be less likely to vote in favor of minimum wage laws. Right? And new technologies help us doing that thing. And you have a lot of entrepreneurship and innovations to discuss economic ideas. I put a list of blogs, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, SFL, Young Americans for Liberty, and all those wonderful organizations that give me money to give talks, like Independent Institute, for example. Now, there's a hopeful change. Look. Right? There's hopeful change. We have more and more people that recognize the cost of a war on drugs because there's more and more education. And that process changed because it came from the bottom. And as it comes from the bottom, and the intellectuals start, which means the media start communicating academic ideas to the general public, more of the general public become more aware of the negative consequences of a war on drugs, and then the politicians decided to accept to legalize consumption of marijuana in Colorado and Washington. There's a book by Ed Lopez and Wayne Layton's called Madmen, Intellectuals, and Academic Scribbler, The Engine of Political Change. It's a very short book. Will summarize well what I'm talking about. And it's a very good book to explain where do political change comes, where do social change come from. It's highly recommended to read. It's easy to read. It's very well written, as a matter of fact. Right. Now, I want to ask my last questions, because I already sold myself as a market anarchist. I want you to think about that question I'm trying to ask myself every day. What can the government do better than markets? Is there anything that the government can do better than markets? Right? Ask yourself that question. Is there any situation where anarchy will be a better situation than any other political system? Somalia has been used as an example. There's studies that shows that since when Somalia was stateless, the state of Somalia, even though was marginally better than when Somalia had a government, a state. Right? Now, is that true that anarchy would be desirable in every country in the world? No. Right? Well, like Peter Leeson says, look, if at the margin, anarchy might be a better system if the government quality is very, very low. When your stationary bandit is no longer a stationary bandit, he's a plunderer, abuses, violation of civil rights, tax you too much, violates your privacy rights, your civil rights, political rights, etc., etc. A dictatorship, right? When you have a huge dictatorship, anarchy might be a better system than a dictatorship. On the other hand, in the US, anarchy will be preferable to the current system? No. Why not?
Relatively representative.
Because the government quality is pretty high. Yes. As much whining I'm doing every day in my classes, as much whining we'll talk about, the government quality in the US is extremely high compared to many other countries. And therefore, there's the benefits of switching to an anarchist system will be not good, because the transaction cost will be far too high. Right? So the concept of anarchy is not the concept of anarchy. Everybody should be anarchist. No, the concept of anarchy is about compared to what? In a system where the government has extremely bad quality, could you envision a state for anarchy being better? Yes, Somalia is an example. But when the government is a high quality, will moving to anarchy will be a Pareto improvement? No. You want to go ahead.
It seems like that with countries with higher quality governments, that the move to anarchy would be better because it has better informal institutions that would make the transaction costs lower.
No, the transaction cost will be far higher because your quality of government is high, your institutions are high, and you want to move to a system where you have no government to enforce those institutions. And therefore, you will have to convince everybody that moving to a situation without government
Okay.
will improve your life when your life quality of life is already very high. Look, as much as I argue that anarchy in Somalia is a better system than whatever was before anarchy, I don't want to live in Somalia. I don't even live in France. So I'm just telling you right now. I want to tell you right now, I'd rather live in US, and that's why I'm trying to become a citizen, than I'd rather live in France. And certainly more to live in France than live in Somalia. Right? I mean, it's like Cuba versus the United States. Well, I'm sorry. I like Cuban cigars, but I still rather live in US than in Cuba. I like have brand new cars and all this stuff. You know, it's 1960 cars. It's not very attractive in Cuba. Does that answer your question? Ken?
Maybe I was thinking, put it in the wrong terms. Maybe the transaction cost would be high because of it being a higher quality government, but it seems like that once you were able, if you were able to get to that there would be reason to believe that the market law that arrives would be more stable and the other institutions would be more stable than in a country that would have like lower quality institutions. It would be easier to get to it in the lower quality, to a lower quality anarchy from a lower quality government. It would be hard to get to from a high quality government to high quality anarchy, but I don't know if
it would be very difficult to go from high quality government to high quality anarchy. But you can go easily from a bad quality government to an anarchist system, even though it's not a good system, it's still marginally better. Because you can have a tyrant and be poor, or no tyrant and still be poor. Well, you'd rather be with no tyrant and be poor than being with tyrant and poor. Yeah.
Also, you know, a good quality anarchy compared to a good quality government isn't that much better, and there's a huge risk that your system is just going to collapse and be a lot worse. So the reward isn't worth the risk of doing it.
I wouldn't say that it wouldn't be that much better.
I don't think we know what the system would look like. I'm not sure we can say.
But I mean, assuming that we're factoring in like costs of like defense, like military defense and things like that, then it seems like it would be at least significantly better than that aspect. But
you don't have any knowledge, you know, you base your comments on all your decisions on any knowledge of what the outcome's going to be.
What does a 21st century affluent anarchist state look like?
Yeah.
Nobody has any clue.
Yeah.
You can't. So it's really
And
but you do know that it doesn't have a military that's going to be spending a lot of resources invading other countries.
Probably not.
And so I think you have very good reason to believe that if you're able to speculate about anything about an anarchist society, it's probably that it doesn't have a military that's going to be invading other people, and that seems like a very, very strong benefit. At least gives it a very high presumption in favor of it.
Yeah, but that doesn't have to.
But think about the current situation. If you look at the surveys of American people now, do you think most people are outraged by the NSA? No. They think it's to protect us, including myself, against terrorists, and therefore you are willing to make a trade-off between security and liberty. So can you imagine that people would be willing to move to a state of anarchy without the government protecting them? No. But on the other hand, when you have a bad quality of a government, when the government does not even protect you, actually the government, you have to defend yourself against the government, of course you are more willing to move to a situation where you have no government because at least you don't have to protect against the people that supposedly protect you. You only have to protect yourself against the roving bandits. All right? So in the current case here, our stationary bandits is not joining forces with roving bandits, so we don't have to protect ourselves against the stationary bandit. Or to some extent, right? We don't have to go into the details. But in Somalia, not only you have to protect yourself against the roving bandits, but you also have to protect yourself against the stationary bandits. So you are far better off, or marginally better off, to get rid of the stationary bandit, which means anarchy, and only protect yourself against the stationary bandits, or the roving bandits. That's the way you have to calculate the cost-benefit analysis. Yes, sir?
Don't we have to create the correct type of mechanism to create our sort of anarcho society, such as modification, secession, civil disobedience? Aren't there mechanisms that we have to go through to sort of create a rule of law?
Okay, so anarchy, libertarianism is not an endpoint, it's more a direction. Anarchy is more so direction, so you go through less government and more private sectors. So for example, you have more privatization of police and privatization of security, right? So if you you have private roads and all these things are being built, so it's a direction you go to. So I mean, I'm not sure you understand your question, but you are, the institutions are here, but they're emerging progressively and slowly. In the case of Somalia, it's just the government just collapsed, pure and simple, because they were attacked by the roving bandits, by all those private, I forgot the term, those over bandits, right? The over military groups that try to challenge the power in current, so everything collapsed. What we observe is that private businesses start developing infrastructures, roads, communication, everything, because there was no plunderer there was no stationary bandit to take away resources that we are using to produce some services. So at the margin, and when I said the margin in Somalia, it means at the margin. It's not you saw Somalia going here to here when they become anarchy. They went there to there. So at the margin, they become better. I don't know what's going to happen to Somalia, but we assume that if that state continues, you could imagine that the society will keep growing, but you could imagine it can fall back in the past and have a new tyrant coming in power.
But can we really say that Somalia is an example of anarchy? Isn't it really just a transition from sort of like a private state?
Is that the way you say it? Yes, but most people say that suddenly you have the government, suddenly you have no more government. No more nation state. How about that?
I guess you can think of it that way.
I'm done, or you want me to take more questions?
Well, you can take more, but maybe take one more, and then we should break and go.
Okay. Look, if you have no more questions, that was awesome. Man. Oh, you have a question. Sorry, go ahead.
In your opinion, without government, my main answer to what government can do better than the private market is mitigate the problems of uncertainty. And that comes from enforcing contracts, primarily. And I just want to know, in your view, is it possible to have enforcement of contracts on a large scale, such as like a U.S. economy, without a government enforcement?
Give me an example.
Like a production contract. I agreed to distribute to you, widgets for X amount of dollars. What is preventing me from making that increases my transactions cost if there is no entity that is completely designated to enforce those contracts? If it's completely up to me to look at their credibility, their past, their
But don't you have private contracts and private arbitration courts that discuss those issues? A lot of businesses, when you engage in business with them, it's written in the contract. If you have a dispute with the contract, we are going to go for a private arbitrator, which is often a retired judge. I would consider that.
Okay. Do you think that can work on a large scale basis? Like I can imagine that can work in specific sectors, but within like, let's say like individual home mortgages or something like that.
So let me ask you, let me change, I don't want to divide too much from your point, but let me ask you this question another way. What happens when you buy a good from China? Who is the enforcer of a contract? You as an American buy a product from, when Apple gets his iPhones assembled in China, who is enforcing the contract?
I would say,
Is there like a supreme government that is going to be enforced the contract between China and US?
yeah, I can imagine since they're both part of the UN, there could be resolution, like ramifications with resolutions against like fair trade laws.
Yeah, but who's going to enforce that? What are they going to do?
Huh?
What is the UN going to do?
Yeah, what's the UN going to do?
Okay, this is where you get into kind of, I believe it's kind of a slight fallacy of composition. Because I don't necessarily think a world actors, individual countries, you can personify as individuals.
I'm not talking about two individuals. I'm talking about Apple versus Apple and their plants in China. I'm not talking about US and China. I'm talking about Apple company when it gets his phone and iPad assembled in factories in China. What happened is the Chinese plant or factory breached the contract. Does Apple is relying on the American any government to ensure that the contract is being enforced?
No, I believe the Chinese government would. Because the Chinese have a stake in having their factories sustain competition.
So you are saying that the Chinese government will say, you have to fulfill the contract with an American company even though you already took their money and we are going to tax you?
Isn't that how government oversight on any financial transaction occurs?
But they don't do that. That's the point. International trade is, they don't.
One of the greatest, for anybody that wants to go to grad school, and I think it's a viable, or even do a research paper as an undergrad, it's a viable research question to ask yourself, is the system of international law working with or without government when it comes to enforce international contract between two private individuals, so two private organizations which are in different countries? I'm not saying I have all the answers to your question. What I'm just saying is, who is enforcing the contract when Apple is asking a plant in China or several plants in China to assemble their iPhones and iPads and MacBook Air?
I think that might be a different situation because you have less players in that situation on a world like international trade basis. You have less players. If you have 300 million people, there's a lot more room for manipulation than if you have, let's say, 30 international competitors in a certain field.
But is it not competition that actually makes the fact that the Chinese factories are going to fulfill the contracts with Apple? Because most products that you buy in the US, most things we all have on ourselves are built in China, India, and foreign countries. And we American companies, well, I'm not, but there are American companies that have all those products assembled in thousands of countries that are not under the rule of American laws. They are not forced to fulfill the contracts because the American contract laws. But competition and the desire to make money give them incentives to fulfill those contracts, reputation mechanism. For example, there's a paper, I'm finishing with that. There's a paper by Gibbons and Avner Greif, which is a professor at Stanford University. They talk about the medieval trade and Maghrebi traders. How do people from North Africa came to Northern Europe to do trade, and how without government, any other government involvement, what mechanisms were in place to ensure that those people were doing what they are supposed to do? And that's where the Lex Mercatoria came in place, was reputation mechanism. So we have to trust, again, nothing is perfect. We have to trust that, I believe that there's plenty of empirical evidence that shows that you have enforcement of contract even with heterogeneous individuals from different cultures without having even government involvement whatsoever. And the evidence of Apple, Motorola, all those companies that build cell phone, all your clothes, shoes, computers, pen, all those things are assembled in different countries. But there's no government to ensure that those contracts are being fulfilled. And you have to believe that there's competition, profit opportunities, and reputation mechanism that make those contracts being enforced. Does that answer partly the question, at least?
Yeah,